Hi. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this month's webcast, Troubleshooting Networking Windows 7, which is an enormous subject. So what I'm doing with this one is condensing it to the salient points, just so that we can fit it into the time that we've got, because it is such an enormous subject and a minefield. And I've got new ways and better ways for you to be able to contact me afterwards as well. Let's just have a look at what we're going to go through in this presentation. So I've split it into 5 different parts. I'm going to begin by looking at the common causes of networking problems and what is most likely to cause network problems in your home or in your workplace. Then we'll look at some of the easy, quick and simple ways of being able to fix network problems in Windows 7. Then, for when those don't work, or if those don't work, shall we say, there are some in-depth fixes that are very useful. After that, Mike's top tips, my very best top tips for preventing network problems from occurring in the first place, and also for quick and easy fixes for network problems. These are absolutely the rules that I live by and that I work by. And then we've got a Q&A. And the Q&A is a little bit different because I also have, this time, because I'm also running a competition at the moment on my Facebook page to win Microsoft Press books and, wait for it, an Acer Windows 7 tablet that's worth around $500. So it's a fantastic prize that I'm just giving away because I can. So more on that at the end of the webcast. Stick around for that. Now it's great to see so many familiar names. Shout out to Dave Sherman, by the way. So like, hi fella, who's always very active on my Facebook group. But for those of you who haven't heard of me before, or sort of may not be familiar with me, I'm the author of the forthcoming Office 365 Security Essentials, the author of the self-published Windows 7 Power Users Guide, and most importantly, and the reason why we're all here, the author of Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out from Microsoft Press and O'Reilly. That is still the only Windows troubleshooting book on the market. Also, here are the different ways that you can contact me, and we'll come back to these at the end of the webcast as well when we're doing the Q&A. There's Facebook, which again is where I'm having my competition. So sign up with Facebook for your chance to win a Windows 7 tablet. There's Twitter there. There's my email address, and I always have a free and open mailbag if anybody wants to email me with any tech problems or questions. And then there's the link through to my website as well, thelongclimb.com. So let's get started with the common causes of network problems. So what are just some of the most common causes here? Well, we've got faulty hardware drivers, and we'll come onto that in a minute. Misconfigured equipment. You'd be surprised how often just having the wrong setting on a computer or on a network router can cause problems, or how, and again something we'll talk about a little later on, how the network settings in your computer can become corrupt quite easily and simply, because all they are, these settings, they're just in a file, so that data can easily become corrupt. This is where I talk about here about corrupt configuration files for your network. You can have incompatible equipment. Now, this is an interesting one because it entirely depends what manufacturer you buy your network equipment from. Myself, I like to try and make sure that all of my networking equipment that I use is all not just from the same manufacturer, but from the same range, because you can guarantee that everything will work properly with each other. Whilst networking, and particularly wireless networking with the new wireless N standard, while there may be standards, internationally recognized standards, each company does occasionally interpret those standards in their own unique and inimitable way, which can bring around incompatibilities between equipment that you use. Poorly written software, this is a good one. If you're having problems on your computer, perhaps you've got a piece of shareware or a piece of trialware or something in the background that's not well written, that's causing problems and bottlenecks on your network. You may even have faulty network hardware. Now, faulty hardware doesn't actually mean it's necessarily faulty. It could be that, let's say, you have a power line networking kit, and all you need to do is something as simple as press the little reset button on that just to reset that to its default configuration, so that begins working again. So it doesn't actually mean it's faulty and not working. It may just mean that it needs to be reset. And hardware and software crashes. Hardware crashes resetting the piece of equipment, and software crashes, well, if you have a software crash on your computer, you're probably going to notice it. But Windows 7 is very good at masking problems going on in the background. So it is possible, though unlikely, that you might have a piece of software that just hangs in the background and Windows doesn't necessarily tell you about it. Now, I want to come back to this first one, the faulty hardware drivers, and look at this in more detail, because you might be surprised how often driver incompatibilities that come through Windows Update itself cause problems. The reason being that your computer is unique. It's unlike any other computer on the planet. There is no other computer anywhere that will have the same mix of hardware, software, patches and updates at all. It's completely unique. So making sure that when drivers are written by the hardware manufacturers that come down through Windows Update, making sure that they will always be compatible regardless of what you've got going on your computer at any one time is an extremely difficult job. And just because something comes through Windows Update doesn't mean it's guaranteed to work. I have regularly, semi-regularly, encountered driver updates that come through Windows Update that cause havoc, sometimes even blue screens. And that's even in Windows 7 as well. So if you're encountering a problem with networking or with any other piece of hardware, just go back into Windows Update and just see if Windows Update downloaded a new driver recently that you may be able to roll back on and remove. So let's have a look at some of the easy fixes, and this rolling back the drivers will look at this as well. Now the first one is the automated troubleshooters that are new to Windows 7. If you've not encountered them before, you can find them in the Action Center, which, and this one never gets old, you access by clicking on the little white surrender flag down by the clock on the far right of the taskbar. To this day, I have no idea why Microsoft made it a white flag, but it's hilarious as anything. If you open up the Action Center, then you will see a troubleshooting section there, and the automated troubleshooters are very good. They're very effective for some tasks. All that they will do is reset a particular Windows component or Windows components to their default state. That's all that they will do. They don't do any intelligent diagnosis. They just reset things. So they're good some of the time, but if you have a slightly more complicated problem, they may not be able to fix it on their own. But the automated troubleshooters are probably the best in the first place to start. But if you're having network problems, then what is going on your other PCs? Right? If you have other PCs in your home or in your workplace, what are those PCs doing? Do you have somebody who is gaming? Do you have someone who is doing heavy downloading? Perhaps they've got torrent software going. Do you have someone who's watching high-definition video? And this isn't just watching high-definition video over the internet. watching, HD video on YouTube or Hulu or a service like that. This could be streaming high definition or Blu-ray video across a network as well. These are very bandwidth intensive tasks, and sometimes you will find that the router that you have can only cope with so much traffic and may stutter and cause all sorts of problems. So, and before you assume that there's a disaster, it's always wise just to find out if anybody is doing anything bandwidth intensive on the other computers in your home or in your workplace. Assuming then that all is well and they're not doing this, it comes down to the first thing you should do is the old adage of have you tried turning it off and on again. And by this, I do not mean just pulling the plug or just pressing the power button and holding it until the power gets shut off on your computer. I don't mean that. I mean properly shutting things down. If you have I have some network attached storage boxes, and if I can just pull the plug on them and they'll turn off. Or I can push the power button and they'll take about a minute or two to shut down properly. And this is what you should do. You should always shut everything down properly. And if you're having a network problem, it's a good idea to shut down everything. Shut down all of the computers, turn off the router, turn off anything else that you have on your network, just shut it all down. Because if you don't, you could find that it was the one piece of equipment that you left turned on that was causing the problem, so that you turn everything on again, the problem's still there. So normally, with so many things, just switching something off and turning it back on again is a really good way of being able to fix simple problems. I'd only be surprised how many problems it may fix. Now, here's an important one. Do you have a password on your Wi-Fi on your router? The amount of businesses and the amount of homes that don't have a password, because frankly these systems can be quite complicated, and you may need to contact your internet service provider to find out how to put a password on it. It is a complicated thing and people don't know how to do it. If you don't have a password on your router, then you don't know if the people who live or work close to you are piggybacking on your internet signal. Now, a little while ago I said, is anybody doing anything bandwidth intensive, such as gaming or downloading or watching high-definition video? Well, if you don't have a password on your router, then it could be the person in the next building that is using your internet connection to do exactly those things. So if you have a sluggish connection, there's almost no way of knowing, short of going banging on the door, that somebody else is using your internet connection. So you need to make sure that you have a password at all time. And you should always make sure that you have an administration password as well for the login for the router. But I'll talk more about that shortly. Now, I mentioned earlier about faulty hardware drivers. Now, you can roll these back in the device manager as well. If you know how to use the device manager, you can right-click on a driver and you can uninstall it, or you can roll it back to a previous version. If you're not entirely certain what change it is that's causing the problem, or if you've made a few changes recently, then you can use System Restore to roll back to an earlier point before those changes were made. Now, System Restore will normally, depending on how many changes you make on your computer, it'll only keep restore points for a few days to a few weeks. And if you, let's say you have done a clean install of Windows and you've installed all your software and done several Windows updates on the top of that, the odds are it won't keep your System Restore points for more than a day. But in general usage, you'll be able to roll back by a couple of weeks or so. So you can use System Restore, which you access by typing Restore or System Restore into the search box in the Start menu. You can use this to roll back your system and see if this fixes the problem. Then the last thing to do is to check the cables and the plugs. Now, you might think that why would you need to check it? Because you don't move your computers around, your router doesn't move, so why would the cables and the plugs need to be checked? Well, to be honest, you never know if one might get snagged by the vacuum cleaner when you're using that, if somebody might trip over something, if the dog might decide to chew it. Fortunately, my dog doesn't chew through cables. He'd probably keep him very busy if he did at my house. And you never know if there might be slight damage to a cable. It's very rare, which is why I put it last on this list. But it's possible that something might have got snagged and might have got yanked, might have got pulled out of a socket, or it might have been damaged. So you never know. Also, with network cables, and you can see in the image here, you've got the little lug on the top, which you use to click the plug in and out of the socket and to secure it there. It's quite common for that little flexible lug on the top to be broken. And if that's broken, there may be nothing to stop the network cable from just pulling out of the socket completely. So that's some easy fixes. Now let's have a look at some in-depth fixes. I know you're going to like this new slide. I showed this to some friends earlier in the week, and they all loved it. But it's an important message. So here we go. Be Sherlock Holmes. Now, this probably the most famous Sherlock Holmes quote from The Sign of Four in 1890, when you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. I say it now. I said it in Troubleshooting Windows 7 Inside Out in my book. It's very important. And the reason it is important is because diagnosing any problem with a computer, it doesn't matter what it is a process of elimination. Because every problem on a computer has to have a logical cause, because this is what computers are. They just work with numbers. So you need to be able to work things through in a methodical manner. For instance, let's say, I'll give you another example, you're having a hardware problem with your computer, maybe it's not powering up. Okay? So you need to find out if there's enough power getting to it. So you do this by unplugging everything except one stick of memory and the processor, just to see if it lights up and it gets power. So you're going through things in a methodical manner, and then you can begin to add pieces of hardware back one at a time until you can find out which bit of hardware it is that's causing the problem. Now, this is exactly the same when it comes to networking. Which piece of hardware is it that's causing the problem? You may have a PC. Let's say you're in a. We'll do two examples. We'll do the home, and then afterwards we'll do the office. In a home, you're going to have. You might have a PC downstairs. If you've got several kids, they might have a PC each up in their rooms. You might have an Xbox or a PlayStation under your TV. That's connected to your network either via a cable or via a wireless. If you bought a new TV, then you may have an internet-connected TV. That may also be plugged in. You may have network-attached storage in the way that I do, or a USB drive plugged into the back of your router. Then that, again, that's connected. And there may be all sorts of things in your home. In an office, it's even more complex. You might have a server. You'll certainly have 5 or 10 minimum computers. You'll have printers connected into the network so that everyone can print to them. So the amount of devices that you've got that are internet connected, sometimes even your fridge, are just huge. And this is why you need to turn everything off. So when everything's off, then try one device and see what happens with that one device. And then you can begin diagnosing with other devices. Which brings me on to the question of, is the problem universal? Are you experiencing exactly the same problem on all of the computers and on all the devices in your home or in your workplace? In this example, in this picture here, we've got a desktop, we've got a laptop, we've got a tablet. They're all connected to the internet. They're all assigned what's called an IP address by your router, which is that device's unique address on your network. Now, quite often on my network here, I will get a little message up on the screen once I've reset the router to say that Windows has detected that more than one device on my network has been given the same IP address, and that's going to cause problems. Now, Windows is pretty good, actually, at sorting that out on its own, but this is just devices running Windows 7. If it's your Xbox, if it's your TV, if it's an older computer running, say, Windows Vista, then it may not be able to sort that problem out on its own, and that can cause problems there. So is the problem universal? Are all of your devices suffering in the same way? If they're not, you may say, well, the desktop is fine, the Xbox is fine, but the laptop, that doesn't have a connection. So you know then that the problem isn't universal, that the problem is probably something to do with that laptop. So can you turn the wireless off on that laptop? Can you turn it back on again? Maybe restarting the laptop is a good idea. Maybe turning it off, taking out the battery, leaving it out for 30 seconds to completely shut it down and turn it back on after that. Maybe that might present a solution. Then is the question of, is there an external fault? Now, I bring this up because one of my neighbours called me round to her house because she couldn't get online. This was a few months back. And every time she went to get online, Internet Explorer just gave her this page cannot be displayed message. That's all she was getting. So I had a look through the Windows settings, reset a router, restarted the computer, no joy at all. Picked up her telephone, phone line was dead. So clearly there was a fault on the line, and this was stopping her broadband connection from working. So is there an external fault? If you pick up the phone, do you actually get a dial tone? Many people might not think to check for a dial tone, but if your internet is dead, maybe your phone line is as well. Maybe you can contact your internet service provider for a status update. Now, actually, all internet service providers will have a live status page online. I keep a link to this on my smartphone so that I can check there, because obviously that goes through my mobile data and not my home broadband. So I can check that. And they're not particularly great at updating these things, but you never know when the information might be there. Now, let's say you have a problem with your with the networking on a single computer. Let's say it was this aforementioned laptop, and you may want to write this down or take a screen grab of it. So I'm going to leave this slide up for a little bit. How you manually reset the TCP IP stack, transfer control protocol, internet protocol, which is the main communications stack and the main communications method between your computer and the outside world. And for anyone who says there's a slash in between those, I took the slash out because it just looks like another eye on this particular slide. So there are several ways to do this. You can either do it, the automated troubleshooter that I mentioned at the beginning of this webcast, that ought to do it, but you may find that it doesn't, or that you've tried it and it doesn't seem to have worked. But if you go to this address, and the only thing you really need to write down is this number, 299357, which is the article number at the Microsoft support website, then there is a Microsoft Fix-It solution here, which is a little program that you can click on the website and it'll run and it'll do it for you. If you're more technically minded and want to do it yourself, if you open the command prompt from the start menu, this is the command here, the net shell command for resetting this internet stack on your computer. So again, you might want to write down this number, 299357, or write down this net shell command, because resetting the internet stack on your computer, on your Windows 7 computer. And bearing in mind, this command is the same for all versions of Windows, not just Windows 7. Resetting this internet stack can fix many problems. But remember, once you've done it, don't just assume that the networking will work. Shut down the PC completely and then start it up and do it from a clean start and see if it works there. Then, if all else fails, and it really is a case of if all else fails, reinstall the network drivers. Now, why do I say if all else fails? How many of you, shout in the chat room, how many of you have done a clean install of any version of Windows and you've gone to use it and you've discovered that you can't download any Windows updates or any other driver updates because the networking drivers aren't installed? So the most important thing to do if you are ever going to reinstall your networking drivers is to make sure you have a copy on a disk or on a USB flash drive or on an external hard drive of those drivers so that you can reinstall them if Windows doesn't do it itself. Now, when you uninstall a driver, especially if it's a faulty one, you'll see here on the slide that usually, but not always, a little tick box will appear giving you the option to completely delete the drivers from Windows, so that when you go to reinstall the hardware, Windows doesn't say, oh, well, there's drivers here, let's reinstall those, because those drivers might be faulty. So you want to be able to reinstall the correct driver. But obviously, being the network, having uninstalled it, you may not be able to get online to actually download the right driver. So always make sure that you have the right driver installed, the right driver on a flash disk or on CD, DVD, or an external hard disk. So now, Mike's top tips. What are my top tips for keeping your network running? Well, the first one involves, apparently, according to the image, a kitchen towel holder. There you go. Always make sure you have a password protection on your kitchen towel holder, which I think is supposed to be a Wi-Fi aerial. Make sure it's got two passwords on it, one for your Wi-Fi access and one for the administration access. Now, your router will automatically have come with a password on the administration access, but they're very common, they're very easy to figure out because they're all the same. The username might be admin, the password might be admin. So make sure that you change this password. You haven't got to change the username, just change the password so that people can't get in, because you don't want people to be able to log into your router and lock you out of your own Wi-Fi, because that can cause no end of problems. So always make sure you password protect your Wi-Fi. The other reason is it's still unproven in court, even though it's been tested in a few courts, especially here in the UK, about how culpable an individual might be if their internet connection, because they don't protect it, is used for criminal purposes. I say criminal, but here in the UK it's currently being tested on internet movie downloads and software downloads. But that's another good reason. Tip number 2. Now, in the BIOS for your computer, which is the text screens that appear when the computer very first starts up, there are options for allowing a network boot, so allowing your computer to start because it's been given a startup signal over a network. And this is primarily used in businesses, mainly for things like clean software installs. This can cause problems. So if your computer is plugged in to a network via a physical cable, a physical network cable, whether you are at home, whether you are at work, and you get almost to the Windows loading screen, but it never goes any further, just unplug that network cable. And 9 times out of 10, Windows will happily start up. And you can just plug the network cable back in, and it will continue working as per normal. It's just that on that occasion, the BIOS and the boot sequencers become confused. It's looking for a boot signal over the network. It can't find it, and it just sits there waiting for it. So, tip number 3. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Can't say this enough. As I say here, sometimes just powering everything down and turning it all on again will fix the problem. You'd be surprised how many times that works. Tip number 4. Now, if you access wireless internet via a USB wireless dongle that's plugged into your computer or plugged into your desktop or your laptop, and you suddenly find that you can't get online, that it's not working, then have you unplugged that dongle? Have you been cleaning the computer? Or have you recently moved house? Or have you moved the computer to a new room? Or have you borrowed the dongle to put it into another computer? Have that dongle moved in its USB socket? Because it's a driver problem for that dongle that you've gone to install that dongle into, driver or configuration file problem. You plug that dongle back into a different USB socket, and all of a sudden it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because either it's not installed the driver properly, or the configuration file for your wireless settings isn't working properly with it in that USB socket. So unplug that wireless dongle and plug it back into the USB socket it was plugged into in the first place. And if you can't remember which one it is, just try them all until you get the right one. But it's a very simple way to fix connectivity problems that you may have with USB Wi-Fi dongles. Then you can delete your Wi-Fi network. Now, I said right at the beginning of this webcast that wireless settings can become corrupt. And once they're corrupt, that's it, they're just corrupt. It's just a file after all, and the rubbish gets written into files. So they can get completely screwed. Now, in Windows 7, you access the network in the sharing center, and this only works for wireless networks. Go into the network and sharing center, and you can see here, click on the little wireless icon down on the taskbar, down at the bottom right by the clock. And then in the blue panel on the left-hand side of the network and sharing center when it opens, you will see right at the top of the list a Manage Wireless Networks link. Go into Manage Wireless Networks, find the appropriate network, the one you can't connect to, and delete it. Just get rid of it. Then connect to that network manually, ordinarily, as you would do normally. You will once again be asked for the password. The wireless settings, the configuration files for that network will then be rebuilt from scratch, and it ought to fix the problem. It does an awful lot of the time. So there's one last top tip, and can you guess what it is? It's not a plea to leave the webcast. No, it's changing your wireless channel in your Wi-Fi. And now there's another hint. If you have an Amazon Kindle, you may have already encountered a problem. That depending on where you live in the world, you can have up to 14 Wi-Fi channels on your router, 14 different radio channels that it can use. Now, most routers, if not all routers, by default are set to fully automatic. But sometimes you'll find that it conflicts with the router next door, especially if they're from the same internet service provider as you, that you're getting conflict on the radio channel. So you can go into the administration interface for your Wi-Fi router, and you'll need to check with the manual on exactly how to do this, because they're all different and the settings are all in different places. And you want to change the radio channel to a specific one. I suggest you don't pick one of the low numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'll normally change it to something like channel 7 or channel 8, something in the middle. Again, I mentioned the Amazon Kindle. If you've got a Kindle and you can't access your Wi-Fi on your Kindle, it's probably because this radio channel is set to one of the high numbers, the 12, 13, 14, and the Kindle can't connect to those by default because in America, obviously the natural roaming home of the Kindle, those channels 13 and 14 aren't generally in use. So always check to see if you can change the channel, and if you can change the Wi-Fi channel, then that again may fix problems, especially if you've got a situation whereby you can get online on a computer that's got a network cable plugged into it, but you find that the Wi-Fi isn't working. So that's the bulk of the presentation, I think in record time. So now we've got time for a Q&A, but also before I do that, an announcement here. These are the different ways that you can contact me. Facebook, Twitter, a direct email address, which does fail occasionally, so if it doesn't get through the first time, then try again, or through my website. Now, on Facebook, as I said, I have Microsoft Pressbooks and an Acer Iconia Tab W500 Windows 7 tablet that's worth around $500 to give away for free. I'm running the competition. It's already been going for 2 weeks, but there's plenty of time to enter. And there's at least 2 books to give away each week, and every entrant has a chance to win the tablet. And you can enter wherever you are in the world, and I'm looking forward to getting as many entries as possible. So again, that's on my Facebook page, which you can see is a new one. If you've been on my Facebook page previously, my Mike Halsey MVP one, I've had to change it. It's now on a new page. You'll see Facebook. Go to Facebook.com/Halsey Mike. Couldn't get it around the other way. Alas, the way Facebook works these days. Go there and enter the competition as many times as you like. So let's have a look at some of these questions. So what have we got?
All right, Mike. Yes, several questions have come in. Are you able to see them in that Q&A tab?
Yes, I can indeed. I can see 8 of them.
Perfect, perfect. And we'll just let folks know real quick. Folks, if you do have additional questions for Mike that we haven't grabbed yet, please put those into that group chat and we'll send them to him. And we do want you to know, because some of these questions may need extensive answers, Mike has graciously offered to contact you all after the event to follow up with you if he was not able to answer those questions. Back to you, Mike.
Okay, right. Let's, what do we got here? How secure is locking the wireless network using the client's MAC addresses? In fairness, I don't think I can tell you off the top of my head, but I'll look into that one, and I'll email you about that. How about some advice that's advice specific to Windows 7? Well, every version of Windows is pretty much the same. With Windows 7, there was very little that's changed dramatically when it came to networking. The automated troubleshooters was pretty much about it. But when it comes to fixing problems with networking, it's, as far as I'm concerned anyway, it's taking a holistic view that it's the chances of it actually being your operating system are fairly small, that it's going to be something else. It's just going to be, you know, a restart. It's going to be just turn the router off and on again. Is going to fix most things. So there's very little that's Windows 7 specific, because there's very little that's actually changed. So Bill, once you have the network connecting and running, what can you do to improve its performance to get the optimal performance from a given set of hardware? That's an interesting question. What can you do to optimize performance from a given set of hardware? Again, this in part comes back to what I said earlier about, certainly with my own networking hardware, I try and make sure that it's not just all from the same manufacturer, but it's all from the same range. So, I'll just buy it all together, because that way you can guarantee that it will all work properly. But things do change over a period of time. I mean, the network connection in your laptop is going to be different. You may get a power line networking kit that you want to use to access a place in the home or the workplace that's inaccessible to Wi-Fi, or where the signal's very bad. So there's not a lot you can do to really optimize the performance. What I would do is I would make sure that you don't have anything running in the background that's going to cause problems. Try and minimize I say this all the time about don't have any software installed on your computer that's not completely necessary. I mean, I don't install any software on my computer that duplicates any features that are already in the operating system, because it's just bloat. It's just going to cause problems somewhere down the line. And the more software you have, given that every bit of software pretty much these days wants to get online, you're going to end up with network problems eventually. Brooke Stevenson, any ideas on how to fix recurring domain name server not found error? Could be many things. Brooke, can you email me with more details of the error that you've got, and I'll look into it for you. Huey, what a great name. How do items like Roku boxes affect computer bandwidth? If you're downloading video, if you've got a Roku box, or you use Hulu, or you've got another similar box, or God forbid a Google TV, then you'll find that if you have a good internet connection, if you don't have a sort of 1 meg internet connection, then you should be absolutely fine. And certainly on your home or on your work networking, then the actual network infrastructure that you've got internally will support bandwidth of about 100 times your internet connection. So you might find that internet really slows because you're downloading. You've got this, you've got a Roku box or similar downloading a movie in the background, or you've got an Xbox downloading an update, but your internal home network is still working absolutely fine. So they can cause problems. I would say, check what these devices are doing. You may have a computer in the background that's just on, that's just downloading Windows updates, for instance. I have this in my own home recently. A friend of mine's on my computer. He's playing Call of Duty Black Ops. All of a sudden the internet connection slows, but I'm not doing anything. Nothing else is on except for the laptop. And he realized afterwards the laptop was downloading Windows updates. So things running in the background, yes, they can affect the bandwidth. Bill, to get an idea if my 1 gigabyte Ethernet connection is working properly, what is considered an acceptable time to transfer a large 1 gigabyte file between two computers on a local network with little or no other activity? 1 gigabyte file, how long would it take to transfer on? It shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes on a good network, but I'll get you the exact figures, and I'll email you. Drop me an email anyway, and I'll get you more accurate figures than I can think of off the top of my head. Should we prefer Microsoft's drivers to those offered by the manufacturers? Yes, yes, yes. They're not Microsoft's drivers, though. Just because drivers come through Windows Update doesn't mean that Microsoft have written them. It just means that they've been submitted to Microsoft for testing, and Microsoft have approved them, and they're being submitted through Microsoft through Windows Update. Yes, always use the Windows Update drivers. As I say, they can cause instabilities. That's just part of the game, unfortunately. But I won't ever install on any computer a driver manually downloaded from another website now unless I really, really have to, because it's just an invitation for things to go wrong, in my view. So my advice would be, yes, if you can, always get all of your drivers from Windows Update. Question from Bill. Use Wi-Fi on a laptop and plug in a faster Ethernet cable. Should you turn off the Wi-Fi, or will Windows automatically use the faster connection? Right. If you're... I had this myself only 2 days ago, actually. Doing an intensive file copy on my laptop over the Wi-Fi, and I didn't want it to take hours, so I dug out a network cable, ran it across the floor, plugged it into the router and into the laptop, and yes, at that point, once you've got a network connection, which should only take a few seconds, only take about 5 seconds anyway, a network connection on a wired connection, yes, you should then switch off the Wi-Fi on the laptop, because Windows isn't very bright and it will probably continue to use that Wi-Fi connection for the networking rather than this new connection that you've offered it. If you turn off the Wi-Fi, then yes, it will force Windows to switch over to the new connection, and any file copy or anything else that you're doing will speed up immensely. So yes, that's all the questions I've got here. I don't know if there are any others, Yasmina?
I am not seeing any others, Mike. Let's just take one more peek. No other questions have come in. Did you have any other messages today for our audience, Mike?
Well, like I say, I always have an open mailbag, mike@mvps.org. Occasionally, email gets bounced back off that one, but if it does, just resend it. You can follow me on Twitter. Everything goes on Facebook, including the competition to win a Windows 7 tablet. And we are looking perhaps at making these webcasts a proper monthly, every single month event. And I would be very interested to hear from all of you what subjects you would like to see me do a webcast on. So feel free to send me your messages, send me your suggestions of what subjects you want to see webcasts done on in the future, and I can make sure that those are done.